Thank you. Oh, can we? It's a night. It's like a release, right? And you feel how you just kind of go, ah. What if that's how we move through life? Right? What if that's the way we move through life? And that's a big part of what we're looking at during our year of empowerment. Because when we talk about empowerment in unity, what we're talking about is being able to access all of the spiritual capacities that are our birthright. Nothing that we have to become. Isn't that a relief? You're already it. No striving, none of that. You're already this beautiful, magnificent being of light. And our invitation is always to sort of just let the blocks fall away so that we shine even more. And that's what we mean by empowering ourselves. And when we empower ourselves like that, we're not just empowering ourselves, we're empowering everyone. So we're in our final week of our book study. Has this been a really powerful experience? I've been hearing really good things about the small groups that have been happening. So this last week is about being open. Being open, because there's this balance that we have to that we're invited to navigate when we're talking about manifesting the life that we are called to live into more fully. We need to hold intention, right? We need to focus our mind. We need to be clear about shifting our consciousness. We need to take those concrete steps. We need to make sure that we're sharing our journey, because when we're doing things in a vacuum, it just becomes a very closed loop. And there is great wisdom that gets imparted when we sort of slam up against each other, as uncomfortable as that might be. And then this last piece, which is like in the midst of all that focus of our mind and taking concrete steps, we have to also be open. We also have to be open to the unexpected. We have to be open to what we don't see. We have to be open to what is actually revealing itself for us, because we get attached to specific outcomes. Anybody in here ever experienced that? If it doesn't look like this, then it's wrong. It's not good. It's not. Okay, so we have to be willing to let go of that, right? We want to always be able to sit in the sweetness and stay open to that there's infinite potential for manifesting our dreams. And the dream that we have today is not the dream you're going to have tomorrow. Take a breath on that one, right? Don't even get attached to the dream. If I was attached to my dream from 20 years ago, I'd still be pounding the boards, right? Auditioning and going to casting calls and living a certain kind of life that actually wasn't fulfilling me. I was fulfilled when I was on stage, but I was not fulfilled in every other part of it. And so by opening up what it might mean, by going deeper into the essence of what my dream was, not the way it was going to show up, all of a sudden, this entire new trajectory showed up in my life. And it actually is completely in alignment with what drove me to be an actor, which was about sharing stories and touching lives and opening up perspectives on what else is possible in the world. Does that sound like what I'm doing now? The essence is the same, but the trappings of it all is very, very different. But that happened because I allowed myself to become open to something. So it means that we have to really be willing to examine the limiting beliefs that we have. And that can be hard because we're attached to our limiting beliefs. We think that they're us. They think that they define us, right? My family was X, and therefore I am Y. That's a limiting belief. I have always been X, therefore I will always be Y. That's a limiting belief. Ernest Holmes used to say, your past is not your precedent. Just because it was does not mean that it has to continue to be. So we want to be willing to challenge those patterns of thinking. We want to be willing to adapt and to adopt new ways of being. And that can be terrifying because it means change. It means the unknown. It means stepping out somewhere that is unfamiliar. But it is precisely in the unfamiliar where our greatest joy resides, where our greatest sense of fulfillment resides. So we have to be willing to let go of all those preconceptions that we have. If I don't have X, then that means Y, right? If I don't do this, then that means this. We have to be willing to let go of all of those preconceptions. And that's inviting us to surrender up some control. If we're insisting that abundance has to arrive in a specific way, we are restricting everything in our life. Can you feel the truth of that? The only way I feel abundant is, then all of a sudden we've narrowed everything down to just one thing. So we gotta not be so rigid. We gotta not be so stuck. We gotta not be so, sometimes our steadfastness, our strength, so this is how our powers can be out of balance. If our strength is so rooted in what was, then it makes pivoting really hard, right? Which is the power of order. So we always want to look at how our powers might be a little overdeveloped in some areas so that we can develop other powers, right? Our other capacities to balance them together. Remember, how Unity understands how the 12 powers work is that when they are in harmony and balance, it is the revelation of the Christ consciousness, the Buddha consciousness, the Atman. That is all of that. When that's all aligned, we get to show up in a completely different way. So we got to loosen our grip. You know what you're holding on to. You know what you have a tight grip on in your world. What happens if we just loosen the grip and see what else is possible? Because what most of us have forgotten to do is how to play and how to have fun. When we loosen our grip, we're able to have fun. We're able to sort of bring back that sort of childhood, that freedom that our children have. My godchild, Roma, had a dance recital. It was adorable yesterday. And as we're waiting to go in to see it, this little girl comes walking by, full-on princess ensemble, with like wand and everything. And so a couple of us were like, that's a beautiful dress. And she just sort of looked at us, just kept going. Like, I don't care what you think about me. I am wearing my outfit, and this is who I am. She had no interest in the adult approval of what she was doing. She was very sure in her own sense of self. So when we're having fun, doesn't everything get lighter? Everything just feels a little bit easier. So my invitation this week is just think about where things have gotten tight and tense and a little bearing down on things. And how can you loosen your grip? How can you have fun with it? Right? How can you begin to shift what that energy is? Because fun is a magnet for abundance. The more fun you're having, the more fun shows up. Right? The more joy you bring to the world and to your life, the more joy comes in to your world and into your life. And as I said at the beginning, there's this paradox that we're being invited into. Because, we're a teaching that believes in seeing infinite possibility and infinite potential, and we know the truth of who we are, and we're here to show up as it. Yes? That's who we are. Oftentimes, that understanding of our spiritual principle is used as a spiritual bypass so that we don't pay attention to what is. We're not willing to really navigate what is. We're so caught up in I don't like this, and so I'm not going to see this. I'm going to only see something beyond it, that we don't deal with what is. But our teaching allows us to actually, the point of our teaching is to say, this is what reality feels like right now. But I know there's more to it, but I can't bypass what reality feels like. I can't ignore what reality feels like because that's a lie. I'm not operating from my most authentic, integrated self if I'm not actually dealing with what is. And so while surrender might feel like giving up, I'm not talking about surrender like waving the white flag, right? That's not what we're talking about when we talk about surrender. We're not saying surrender into negative circumstances and just give up all hope. That is not what unity means by surrender. What we mean by surrender is look at the fact that things are hard right now, and how am I being invited to change so that I can navigate what is with greater grace, with more love, with more capacity of who I know myself to truly be. Can you feel the difference? So when we talk about surrender, it's not just let it all go. It's, no, I'm going to access something about who I know I am that perhaps I never accessed before. Can we all agree that there are parts of ourselves that we have never fully explored? That we have capacities and abilities that we have never actually completely and totally brought to the fore? That's what we're here to do. To just keep growing and growing and growing. Doesn't that sound like fun? Right? So we want to work with reality, not against it. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? Because manifestation is happening in time and in space. So if we want to manifest in time and space, we got to work with time and space. Does that make sense to everybody? So one of the ways we can do this is by what we call exploring the opposite, right? Exploring the opposite. So in order to challenge our basic assumptions, which we sometimes can't get out of, we're just so locked into a perspective that we cannot shift. We cannot move that needle. I know I'm right. Ever have that? I know I'm right. I know they're wrong. I know it. And so by exploring the opposite, we're inviting ourselves to practice something that invites us to grow and have flexibility and access different spiritual capacities within ourselves. That is always what we're seeking to become and to be in time and in space. So the greatest work for this is Byron Katie's The Work. Do people know Byron Katie's The Work? Yeah. Her simple 4 questions. Is it true? Now, usually when we're really hooked on something, we're like, yes, it is. Right? And then we ask ourselves, can you absolutely know it's true? And maybe there's a crack there. Well, it feels true, but can I absolutely know it's true? Already we're starting to open up to something, right? How do you react when you believe that thought? Oy. Right? When I believe that thought, right? I don't feel good, I feel small, I feel disempowered, right? All of those things. Who would you be without that thought? How would I be without that thought if I didn't believe that thought? So the example Ken uses in the book is when he and JD were looking to adopt their second child. And they had adopted a teenager. They were looking to adopt an infant. And they were going through all these different processes, and they were working with a private adoption company at first, and they spent a lot of money. And they spent a lot of time supporting this birth mother. And only to find out, as they got close to the 9-month mark, that she had several families supporting her. And that the whole thing was basically not going to happen because she really never had any intention of giving up the baby. So Ken called me devastated, right? Just devastated. Feeling taken advantage of, feeling like the adoption process was very unfair, right? And the whole situation was just unfair. And also feeling really kind of foolish that they had given all this time and energy and money to someone who took advantage of them. And I said to him, the good you give in the world is never wasted. The good you give into the world is never wasted. So while they might not have been the ones who got to actually reap the good, that money supported that child that they might never have, they're not going to call their own, but is there good in the world because that child actually had support that it needed? So this is the place where in the turnaround, you have 3 options in the Byron Katie turnaround. So the first is the direct opposite, right? So it's the opposite of the original thought. So Ken's original thought is that this entire adoption process is unfair and that it's never going to happen. So the turnaround becomes the adoption process is fair and full of opportunities. Hard to process when you're caught up in your story, but if you can open to that, can you see how there's possibility all of a sudden? Is it true? Is it really, really true? What if it's not true? Who would I be without that thought? I would believe that the adoption process is fair and full of opportunities. Which way do you want to live in the world? Reverse self-reference. So replace the subject with yourself. So instead of the adoption process is unfair and creating obstacles, I am unfair to myself and create obstacles in this process. And was he being unfair to himself? Yeah. He was feeling foolish. He was feeling like he shouldn't have been scammed. He was beating himself up for believing, right? Is that fair? No. And was all of that creating obstacles to this process continuing? Because they were shutting down in their pain, and right? They were just creating obstacles for them to be able to continue forward. And then reverse others. So include a larger audience or others that are involved. The adoption process is about serving the child's best interest, not just mine. Now, can you see how by exploring the opposite, all of a sudden, all these other possibilities come up besides the narrative that we get fixated on, right? And the beauty is that Ken and JD did all this work. And he was blogging about it, because that's Ken, right? Whew, everything's out there. And so he's blogging about it, about the whole experience. And all of a sudden they get an email from a woman who says, my husband and I would like to have a baby for you. And they met the family, fell in love, got along, and that's where Roma came from. Right? Just like that, when we shift our consciousness, something else is possible. Now, did Ken and JD go through a moment of like, this could be another scam? Did they let it dictate what they were going to do and how they were going to move into the world? No, they went forward, listening, discerning, paying attention, not being blind, but also not letting fear and limiting thoughts and constrict what was possible in their life. It's a great story, isn't it? So what we want to be is open and real, and we want to work with reality, not against it. Work with it, not against it. And I love this example. How many sailors do I have out here? People who actually know anything about sailing. They're still, and I know Kathleen and Art are watching remotely. So when the wind's at our back, sailing is a breeze, right? Just like whoosh, there we go. But windward sailing is a whole other thing. So you go out onto the bay, and then you have to come back. And instead of the wind being at your back, the wind is blowing in your face. Anybody ever feel like that? And there is a way to navigate that, though, right? Where sailors tack, right? And they're creating the zigzag pattern so it's not as, we love the straight line, don't we? But the zigzag pattern is still building momentum. It's still moving us forward. It's a way to harness the wind that seems to be against us and make it work for us. Both of them will move us forward. They just require different skill sets from us. And that's what we're doing here, is building those skill sets. Being able to acknowledge, the wind's coming. If we don't acknowledge the wind is coming at us, we're not going to make any headway, because we're not able to adapt and meet it and navigate it and begin to do something that will allow us to harness the power of that wind. That's what we're being invited to do in our life. That is what unapologetic manifestation is all about. Not sitting in the boat crying because the wind is coming in our face. Right? You can have your moment and cry, that's okay. But then we want to bring our tools online, because that's what we have available to us. So I summed this up. This is my version of the 5 steps, right? Of his 5 steps. Own your purpose. Don't be willy-nilly about it. Own your purpose. And if you don't know what it is, own the search and the journey and the exploration of your purpose. Does that make sense? Awaken possibility. That's about shifting consciousness. That's about doing the Byron Katie work. That's about like awaken the idea that there is possibility. So you're not locked in. You're not locked in by the circumstances of the world. That you know that you can begin to tack against the winds that seem to be working against you. Persist through action. Baby steps. Baby steps. Take a baby step. I love the tacking, because it's about just do something that supports momentum, and then you can adjust. And that's the zigzag, right? It's not always going to be this super straight line. And be okay with the fact that as you're tacking, you might be like, oh, look how pretty that is. Let's go over there instead, right? Let it shift for you. Connection as catalyst, right? How we interact with each other, using collaboration, using each other's energy to be a catalyst to keep supporting us. That, for me, is what Unity in Action, what we're going to be doing over the next 3 or 4 or 6 months or a year or however long we need to do it, right? Is connection as catalyst. That none of us are in this alone. Take a really deep breath there. None of us is alone in whatever it is that we're trying to navigate. And then welcome the unexpected. Be like, that's challenging, but I'm going to explore it, right? That's the only thing we have to ask ourselves. I honestly really believe that one of the reasons why that toddler teacher, which Cindy has been working so hard to manifest that toddler teacher, it's when we brought it to the community and the community got involved and the energy and the catalyst of the connections shifted something. And there this toddler teacher dropped into place. Unity in action. This is our empowered, prayerful response to this time of change. This is us as a community bringing all of our skills, all of our spiritual tools, all of our capacities to know the highest, to live the highest, to live into our teachings, to live into our vision, to be the embodiment of our mission. We get to do this together. And I don't want to be anywhere else, honestly, right? I mean, this is how we together are empowered, not by one, but by many. The unity in our action. Yes. So let's take this into our time of meditation. Because there's a lot in here, yeah? So we're just going to take a breath. And just as we quiet, just inviting you to listen a little bit, right? Tune in, listen. And I invite you to listen for the resistance. Where's the resistance? Where's the story? Where's the, oh, I couldn't possibly? Because what we're stepping into is the realm of infinite possibility. There's so much more that we're all capable of sharing, of being, of giving. Because that's our strength. We're a community of giving. And so just sit with whatever that limiting idea might be, wherever it is in your life. And just ask yourself, is it true? Can I absolutely know that this is true? And then just check in as to how that idea, that resistance, that thought, that belief, how does it make you feel? What's happening in our consciousness as we carry that with us? And then let's just sit with, who would we be without that thought? What becomes possible for us if we're not buying in to that thought, that idea? Who would we be? And let's just rest there for a minute or two in the silence, enjoying who we would be if we were free of that limiting idea. And so as we go forth this week, the invitation is to just keep exploring. How could you turn this around? What's the opposite of that limiting idea? How can you stand more steadfast, not in the small idea of who you are, of who this world is, of what's possible? But how can you anchor yourself in the truth of who we are, with an open heart, with open hands. Accessing all of the different ways that we process information, and just allowing that as we rest in the sweetness of life to open our hearts, open our options, open the way we take baby steps in the world. Opening our yes. I see us each going forth this week and the next, just with a willingness to shift, to grow, to allow something more, so that we may shine our light more fully, more brightly. And so it is. Amen. Ashe. So our affirmation for today is, I release limiting beliefs and open to the field of infinite possibilities. Let's know this together. I release limiting beliefs and open to the field of infinite possibilities. Let's stand up and say that one, right? Stretch out, like bring the body in, right? Okay, kind of shake out whatever we need to shake out. Right? All right, let's say it again. And maybe when we release, let's release. Right? Okay, do a little wiggle or something. And as we're opening, do something that says opening. Ready? Here we go. I release limiting beliefs and open to the field of infinite possibility. One more time. I release limiting beliefs and open to the field of infinite possibilities. And so it is.